No.
Yeah.
Sweet. Great. Maybe, I'm not sure, do I have permission to share my screen or can you give that to whoever can? I mean, I think everyone has the Figma doc, but
yeah,
probably, I don't know if it'll be easier to share screen or not. Let's get the infinite sharing going on. Beautiful. Great. So I tried to kind of like, the first thing that I tried to do is like maybe summarize a little bit of like where we kind of ended last time. So I created this list of like kind of like bigger questions, and hopefully that like spawns into maybe more specific stuff for us to nail down. One was like just keeping a Git organization for all of this code, as opposed to just like someone specifically owning the repo is kind of distributing that ownership out to the organization instead. So all of those code repos can kind of exist in one place. I don't know if we want to split front end and back end in separate repos, same repo, whatever, but at least like the organization should have flexibility for that. So I don't know if there's like a specific name that we want to do that under. I don't think Buzzard works.
No.
Where does it work?
Something relational or something abstracted from that.
Relational feels like a nice place to start.
Okay. Well, works for me.
Relational.
Hyphen OS.
Yeah, is that?
Even though OS is typically like would be, I think, a subcomponent, but still kind of it could be changed. It's a nice.
Yeah.
It's very catchy for now.
Yeah.
We could change that later, right? Does
Yeah,
this need to be any specific email, or is there a Buzzard email?
We got a Buzzard email. With
the one that has access to it later.
Hey at buzzard.life.
Hey at buzzard.life.
Yeah, we can give access to everybody who needs it.
Great. Are you at calculator?
Yeah.
Nice. Shahruz is Shahruz. John. Are you John?
I think it's no, I think it's still JBOR. ICH. I should change it. CHEV. Yeah.
Thank you. And then K Pavli.
I think it might. Yeah, let me go check. I don't even.
I mean, there's a K Pavli.
Is there a K Paxel though? Sometimes I do that.
Paxel? Yeah.
Yeah, it's K Paxel.
Okay, well, hopefully.
Maybe I have two.
Hopefully my password works. Great.
I think this is all analytics. So
this all doesn't really matter, right?
I don't think so. Do you have an existing? I guess that would just be.
We'll say no for now. And
yes,
or should I say yes?
Oh yeah, we could transfer in Buzzard or. Yeah, I'm not even sure why they care.
Yeah, we can transfer it in sometime. So cool. Okay, now everyone has the invite for this. We have that done. Great.
Done and done.
Done and done. Okay, so how about schema? Can we kind of just try to finalize on the basic schema that we had? I know like the top level stuff was already there, but maybe we can like really get it down to programming level kind of ability of like finality. Yeah, specificity. Yeah. Oh man, this is gonna be so annoying. Okay. So I think we had these 6 fields. File name was more for Git than it is anything else. Creator, date time, block type, context, and content. Those were the only ones we were planning on for now, right?
That's all I had.
Okay, cool.
As I can tell.
Okay, and file name, did we decide on using a Unix timestamp or the hash?
I remember it was basically timestamp for now and then hash when we have full integration with IPFS.
Okay, so let's do
Switch over.
timestamp for now. And for creator, I think Kristen made a note on this too, is like, how does this differ from author? So that's what I was wondering as well, is like, do we want to use text or do we want to use an Ethereum address and then like map that into authorship within the Buzzard repo or the 11T site rather?
We talked about this being like somebody could create it on behalf of people, and then there being some sort of owner like mentality in the context bucket. That's kind of where I remember us leaving off, but I might be.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt it too. It's like basically the person that like created this block, not authoring. So that's like not really involving that level yet. And I guess I kind of also thought about integrations. Like if something is pulling information from another place, this may be a good place to identify like what that source is, and that there could be multiple of those names that map to like a single creator in the future.
So John, are you saying that like, say you had like some kind of like third-party app that is like authoring on the behalf of you, is the app the author, or is the person that they're authoring on the behalf of the author?
It would probably be something like Johnbo via GitHub. It's where you still have both pieces of information.
Where you still have both pieces.
Yeah.
Okay, so how are we going to encapsulate that in this field?
I mean, that's why my feeling is just text. And
just
like,
text.
Really simple and open for now. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone have problems with text?
Nope.
Okay.
Are we just picking a username and sticking with it?
I think that would be the case. So it's whatever username you're using on the Buzzard website. Okay. I think briefly we mentioned date time. We could do the ISO date time, and this has a built-in thing for time zone as well. So I imagine like everyone's fine with that, unless there's a more specific kind of time zone thing we want to go for.
Buzzard time.
Buzzard time. Yeah, all good with that?
Yeah.
Cool. Block type, all text. Okay. That looks like nodding heads. Context, also all text. Is this going to be able to be markdown or just pure text?
I was thinking about this one. Like some markdown could be nice there, like bolding and italics, but I feel like any additional markup syntax in there could get things like a little scary and inconsistent for displaying this data in various places. So like keeping it as simple a rule set as possible, and maybe even text, like that has a sense of just like standard. I mean, it'll just be able to be like displayed anywhere and everywhere without a problem.
So this is context, right? Not content.
Not content.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the only feeling I have about it. Like I could see both being nice here.
So how are we using, or how can you see people using this in the short term? Yeah, like how are you modeling it?
So I guess one way potentially that I could see it, I mean, I guess even now thinking about it a little bit further, this could be like something like JSON as well. But I think probably text is a good starting point before we start structuring it more towards JSON or anything else.
Sure.
Even like text markdown is kind of unnecessary in the way that you could still potentially use markdown syntax if you really wanted to, and it still fits in a pure text document. I imagine like bullet points and stuff like that are probably going to be used. And I can imagine like if an app was creating this, it might just inject GPS coordinates into context or something. And that can be done again, just like via bullet points. It can kind of be free form, because it seems like right now this is more like a dumping ground than anything else, that just free form text seems to be okay. And it appears that we want to structure it at some point, or at least to some degree, or the structure will emerge and it'll be pulled out of context into something else. But right now I think it's kind of unknown. So that's kind of why I was curious, like, do we want to specify it down more as we go now, or just kind of let it emerge later on?
Yeah, I'm more curious how you make this decision. Like, is it just a scratch pad and then you have a place to put stuff, and then as something like patterns emerge, you're like, all right, well, we've got this, it's a mess, but we at least know that there's a place to put stuff? Or
Remind me
curious
how we're using this field or how it's being populated, because my notes were magical context creator, and I was like, wait, what? And I was like, I didn't know what that meant. It was just me.
No, I mean, we were talking about that, like, so.
And it being a toehold for into relational, and like that potentially being its own schema like down the road. So like, yeah, what is context? How is it Yeah.
As I understand it, and then you guys can help me, is we turfed it like we need to store the relationships and then any sort of contextual information and any stuff that is not included in this schema somewhere. And there's going to be a bunch of
extra metadata.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think things that can't really fit into metadata. So maybe you just want to use pure English to describe that this was a walk between such and such. And it's just like the magical part from that comes in the fact that the computer doesn't need to understand it. It's going to be used strictly for us. And so, Dave, in terms of those short-term like use cases, I'm basically just imagining it being like displayed next to elements for the most part, or like in lists, maybe just like to give you like a slightly like secondary poke at like whatever.
Yeah, and then so it's a scratch pad for future relational patterns, and also, you know, like minimally you can add contextual, like human readable information to it, and then like the sort of relationship primitives that Shahruz was talking about last time can start to develop here. Like if you start, I don't know, encoding this with near something else or next to or child of or whatever. Okay. Got it.
So I think you make the decision based on like what's the most extensible in the future as far as like being able to change it if necessary, but go as simple as possible to meet the needs, right? Like if we don't need markdown now, don't do it, right? Like why, we could change it later, right? It's not a big one. I don't know, that's my sense of it.
Yep, I mean, I agree. I feel like the one potential way to do those feature changes might be just a simple versioning. So this is version June, and then version July might look different. At that point, we like switch over, and then that way there's always like a clear differentiator in terms of when we started and stopped using it.
Got it. Cool.
Okay.
Text.
So text, and we can maybe like throw in like some level of like, maybe within that, just like some version or something. And I think finally the last one that I was a little bit curious about, and this is related to the below questions as well, is like how are the blocks stored on GitHub? I think we did say as markdown with front matter would be the way. And so content, I was wondering, is this binary data that's just getting shoved into a markdown file? Or are we always expecting true text data, like proper markdown to be stored? Because it seems like we have this distinction between blocks and assets as well. So this was another question, is if assets are going in the assets directory, are we always providing a link into asset in the block itself? So it's like kind of when you create or when you upload, say, an image into the system, it's going to upload that image into assets and then also create a block for that image. Is that kind of the flow we're imagining, or is it just going to say like this block is the binary data of the image? I think this is where it like kind of like gets a little bit shaky for me. So I was kind of just curious thoughts there.
I was picturing it being markdown text with, if every asset also needs to be a block, that might make pulling in external assets feel like different in the flow. Whereas you probably want them to feel pretty similar, I would imagine. like linking to an external image or uploading one. So I think it's more consistent if it's text markdown and then a link to the asset that's been stored separately.
Okay.
I'm feeling the same, and the one side effect of that is that you could like use weird editors without having to worry about whether they're opening like the binary files fine. So like GitHub editor will work in case you ever need to go in there and like just modify some stuff at the last second.
Right. Yep. Totally. Okay. Yeah. So we'll say that's like text markdown, and then also that's all of this will be stored on GitHub as markdown with row matter. Right. And then leave the possibility for whatever changes as necessary moving forward. Okay. So I think in terms of like raw block schema, that's everything, right? Unless anyone has anything else, but I think that's kind of now decided.
Works for me.
Good.
Cool. Also, I like, Kristen, your note here works with humans and computers.
That's awesome. Didn't see that.
Yeah, it just
that should be a
reminded
label
me.
in the future.
Yeah,
The stickers on websites.
His tagline.
Totally. Yeah, it reminded me of this now more human driven, later more computer driven. Great. Perfect. I think that's the magic. That's the magic, right?
Yeah, we're just context is just a big bucket that a super sentient AI can fit themselves into. Easy.
Yes. Yes. Alrighty. So next was like this assets thing. So I think we also answered this question: are assets blocks? And no, they are not blocks. They are assets. And essentially, any raw asset that goes in will be treated as the same as any external asset. So it'll have a link, effectively. It's fine. It's fine for now. Everyone's fine with that too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now is the thing of posts. So a post, I feel like, is our first real, like, maybe like secondary Lego, or like really like Lego that we're building, because blocks are kind of just existing on their own. Maybe they have a display form on the website themselves, but mainly a post is, I think, what we're mainly planning on for actually delivering content to the 11T site, at least per my understanding. I think is that kind of the understanding of everyone as well here is.
Yeah, I think secondary Lego is a good way to put it. Where like we're defining more of the underlying format here. So getting this to be parsable is, I think, priority number. Well, parsable by who? I guess like it needs to be easy to write and easy to parse.
Yes.
And lists are nice for that. Bullet points are nice for that. So really, this is like more of a stylistic thing. It's just got to be consistent.
Exactly. So I 100% agree, John. So I was kind of just wondering, like, do you guys have any preference for a list, just a comma? Like, essentially, this would be like ID here would be the Unix timestamp of the block. So it would just be like Unix timestamp, Unix timestamp, Unix timestamp, and that ordering would represent like the order that it's going to get displayed on the web page itself too. So is there any preference, like list, like using like some kind of list syntax versus a list enumerated by commas, or like demarcated by commas, or just in bullet points you say bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, and that's what pulls out each timestamp?
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is like, what if we just go almost one layer, like simpler, and just do like file open blockity, 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 and just separate it by new lines, no nesting, no extra like characters at all.
I see. So instead of like bullet points here, you're seeing just like ID new line, ID new line. Yeah.
That way,
totally.
In the future, there may be, I mean, like, it just feels like really easy to map that to the file itself, because you could then imagine almost like a zooming thing that just like opens up a bunch of blocks and replaces them on the screen without, if you want to like move things around or something.
Totally.
There might be some convention for, I like that, but there might also be some convention for wrapping the IDs so that some interpreter knows that there are like transclusions that need to get imported. I'm not sure what that might be though, but I would imagine that somebody's done work on that and there might be a standard already. So like just like it would be ID on each new line, but they'd be like wrapped in like curly brackets or
parentheses
like
or something. Yep.
Yeah.
And maybe the reasoning for that too is like you could have like groups of them operating in different fashions, something like that.
Yeah, and I think also just so that other Markdown interpreters are able to like either render it correctly according to some existing standard or ignore it as opposed to just printing out the IDs as plain text.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this would be like something like Markdown transclusion. Like if there's already like an existing Markdown standard for this, can we?
Yeah, or like I think people write extensions that might be some standards for.
Like these kind of curly braces, something like this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So do we want to just do like a list like this with new lines, just using these curly braces? Because it seems like it's just a text file, and like that should be simple enough. If you just say block / that ID dot markdown or whatever it is, that should be good enough. Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Alrighty. So let's say we're going to do something like, it'll be like this, no bullet points, and this will be .md blocks / I'm assuming that we're using blocks as the directory. I think I put this as a point somewhere else, but I don't know if anyone's going to have any contention with that, so I think that should be okay.
I think so.
Right? Okay. Okay, cool. So that should create our post now as a list of these. Then once we have like either a markdown render on the site via 11t, it can do this potentially automatically via this. Otherwise, we might just have to create that markdown file directly ourselves.
Yeah, a super small layer. So
yeah, yep, exactly. So at least that should be mainly okay.
So
cool. Now types. So Kristen, you had a note here too. Could you actually like add on? Like I kind of just threw out a bunch of like random types that I was thinking of, and they kind of go like different patterns. So I was curious your thoughts here as well.
I don't know that. So I think it was Dave that talked about a predefined set, a handful that will work for most people, but so I don't know if it was kind of what I was saying earlier, start with the most simple that we can build from. So like V1, it doesn't have to be the whole kitchen sink. Again, to Dave's point, how do we make that decision now? But yeah, I think it's mostly notes for myself to think through like how these will be used. And I think the interpretation and rendering is like later stuff. So more of what we're talking about. So if you, like what Shahruz just said, if you put it in the curly brackets, then you can retrieve it more quickly in the future.
Right.
Yeah, I think the
what is the starting point? I don't know.
I think like the place I was coming from with that was probably related to whatever pipes are making these things. Like if there is a flow and that flow is like pushing images, and then we've got a reason to build out our image type, and text the same thing, and this is or YouTube annotation, all of those like sort of start speccing them out in relationship to building them, or the likelihood that we're going to get into those. But But yeah,
That makes sense. Yeah.
that's probably what I was talking about. I don't know.
Because if piping the media in is a job in and of itself, not biting off too much, I think, is the main idea.
Yeah, and then we talked about how, or Shahruz mentioned that there would be like sort of more information on how to like display each type or whatever, and that would be conditional on what the thing's doing, to the extent that like the complexity of what a player on the other end or viewer is going to need to barf it out or something. Yeah.
What's the set that Tumblr had? Does it feel like they had some basics, like 5 or 6, right?
Yeah, they had
text,
image, text, quote, video, and something else.
That is a very
I think
nice
they might
set.
have had an audio
Very
one.
satisfying.
Yeah, audio. Yeah, we had, ours were similar.
Yeah, it seems like text, audio, image are all like pretty like required.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. It's funny that quote was its own thing.
Quote, that is kind of funny.
What is like why? Yeah.
If I remember, I'm not sure why culturally. My guess for technically was just because like Tumblr was, I think, the first person to do the retweeting sort of functionality, which is like stored as a separate type of post. It's like explicitly a like credit, pass, or honor type of spread.
Yeah, link is the other one.
Link, yeah. Do we want to call it URL or link?
Well, link, I guess there's a bit of a difference there. URL feels like it refers to a like remote resource, and link is more like a thing that you will be able to consume on your phone.
A thing that you can consume on your phone. So explain that.
Well, I feel like if it's a URL, I feel like I'd be more likely to put like giant PDFs in there because it's just like a file. But then like if it's linked, there, at least my understanding of it, or like my sense is a little more towards like something that you can consume and is maybe like possible to load up on your phone without needing like a giant computer and all that.
More like kind of web page focused.
So it may not be like a big distinction, but I guess, yeah, like I do wonder if there is a difference between like pointer and link, I guess, between those two sort of sides here, or should they even be separate things?
Yeah, so the purpose that you're pointing to here is like an external source, and that external source can be a file, a document, or something like that is readable in its like packaged state, like a PDF or whatever. Or it can be something that is a hosted, like rendered in some external viewport kind of media. Yeah, I mean, these for Tumblr, like, I mean, people must have used them, but I didn't run across, like, a lot of these were sort of, there were probably sub-communities, but the primary use case was images. Like everything in text, everything else dropped off a cliff after that. So, in my experience, even videos and stuff like this, people would link up, they would get no engagement though. Not that that's the point, but in the game of the system, they were underdeveloped. So I don't know what, like,
what we're talking about right now is not necessarily, like, we can show this like UI wise any way we want, right? So it doesn't.
Yes, but we kind of need to know how to do it, because if it's a Figma document, then we should like, well, it would be nice to not have to determine that from the URL itself and like know to render that like natively.
But
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so I wonder, maybe for simplicity's sake, because I kind of noted some of these things down, like URL YouTube, that could be similar for URL Figma. If these are like certain types that we run into when rendering, that we're like, okay, we really need to add this, and it kind of comes then rather than anytime else. And any existing like YouTube link, we can kind of like back run something to say like, we're going to turn all of these into URL/YouTubes if they have like some regex in them.
And I guess
I don't know
there's
if that's
changelog,
like,
which makes that always like reversible and grokkable.
right. So if everyone's, I think, is everyone like kind of okay with that? Is just kind of keep it really simple right now. It's just like a URL, and in Markdown, what that'll mean is that this is just going to get turned into the standard URL kind of syntax in Markdown. Audio, I'm imagining probably it's going to end up as the same thing unless there's some embed for Markdown. Also for the same thing for video, and then image would use the image syntax instead. I might have gotten some of these backwards. Right.
Yeah, so just the Markdown hyperlinking, right?
Basically Markdown hyperlinking for most of these, at least initially, and maybe audio and video kind of get treated the same as URL to begin with as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think as we hit each of these, or we develop pipes into them, like the feature set will build out, or whatever, like some common way of barfing these out or creating viewers or whatever. Makes sense.
Okay.
The one tangential question I guess I had relative to types is, would it be useful to specify both input type and output type specifically?
That's a good question.
And I feel like output can always just default to input type, so we don't have to like figure out all the output types separately. It's more just like, if at some point you want to output a URL as a post or a post as a URL, you just like get to use one of those two flags.
Yeah, that could be quite handy. That could be quite handy for sure.
Can you explain that again?
So basically, I'm wondering if it's useful to capture like 2 points of information about each of these blocks. This one feels like it's trying to answer 2 questions at once, like how was it created and how should it be displayed? And just to keep things as like clean and easy as possible, instead of trying to always combine those 2 sets, maybe they could be broken out one level further.
I'm following. I had a similar thought, but then I thought it was getting ahead, so I sort of pulled back, because for me to understand how this works, I like want to know what it looks like on the front end. I think maybe because my understanding of this is still young. But yeah, like what I was visualizing is if you drop something in, how does it recognize, like it recognizes what it is, but then how is it showing it? Like what's the, so I think that's similar. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a really good point. I'm curious whether we want to include like syntax for this now or like kind of push it off later. I think the syntax could be simple enough where it could be worth kind of just putting in now. And most things would probably like it's really up to the front end to even like consume and do anything with that information. Like it would just be assumed. Really the input would always be the output as well to begin with, and then from there we can kind of modify them. I initially just wrote like this kind of syntax makes sense to me, is like you input a URL and it became like a consumable URL/YouTube. I don't know if like that's like useful syntax, or there's some other syntax that might make more sense. I kind of just ad hoc did that.
Are there use cases outside of URLs for the input and output being different? Or is it specific to that format, to that type?
John, can you think of an example that's not a URL?
guess I was kind of picturing like a text input and audio output, or the vice versa. But if we have the files locally and they're like all local links, then in some sense, it's always pointing to a URL, if that makes sense.
What are your thoughts, Shahruz?
I can only think of URL so far. Like for text to audio, I think it would just be like a URL that's automatically linked to that asset.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. And then on the URL stuff too, there might be, I haven't looked at it in a long time, but I think OEmbed might be a standard for like these kinds of problems of how do you take an arbitrary URL and then get back like an iframe to embed, regardless of which service it's coming from. So that might be one way to like, if that works the way I'm thinking it does, it might be one way to shed complexity on having to like do subtypes for the URLs.
That would be pretty sweet. And I was kind of thinking we probably just knock the audio out, knock the video out. Image probably can stay the same just because Markdown has syntax for it. But if OEmbed or something similar can handle that, that would be pretty sweet.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay, so on this like side question, do we just keep input output as the same and have no syntax for it, and see if a like use case arises where it seems like very necessary, or if it can be kind of dealt with a different way?
That's the way I'd be leaning now.
Okay.
Just as simple as possible.
And then make a note of it in context if it feels like it's too restrictive and that this would be useful. Yeah.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. Okay, how are each handled when to be displayed on the site? I think this will be very kind of up to front end. It seems like for the most part, like this now captures that as well, especially since we know content is, or blocks are going to have Markdown in them already. I think a lot of that kind of got answered. And do applications create their own type, or are they expected to conform? So I think this was going along the same kind of side of authorship, where they're, does an application say, I have my own type, and like that's going to get displayed in some special way, or that should they conform to the base types? My kind of feeling is it should conform to the base types, but I was curious other opinions on that.
I think starting off that way and then figuring out like, here's a specific format that you can follow. So if you want to like make a custom thing, you can put it up on GitHub and then other people will be able to import it. And as long as everything's following the same protocol, I think, including the standard types that we come up with, I think if they all have the same format, then that makes things nicely extensible. And then if people want to like update their client to include more types that are popular in the community, there's a pretty straightforward way of doing so.
Yep. I think that kind of makes sense too, because we're already starting to get to the point where we're having that with like this post type. I guess I kind of forgot to mention it here is, what is the block type of a post? I imagine it's just post.
I was imagining the same.
So in a way, I think we've kind of encapsulated these base types already within post, and that now has its own like schema associated with it. So it would be kind of similar if anyone from the community was doing something similar as well.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Okay, we're almost done with this. There's a lot of definition stuff.
Can I just say I'm very happy to like reply to Figma documents in this form. This is like makes a lot of sense in my brain. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to do that next
cool.
time offline and add some kind of like weird voting thing in there too, like just like colors of like how agreed you are upon that thing, as a more like distributed way of doing it instead of having to synchronize. I'm also totally up for that, because throwing this together didn't take that much time, and it was really easy to ask a lot of questions.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love this.
Yeah, I can design little dammits for voting and stuff if
Sweet.
we come up with little visualizations. If you give me a function and I can display it.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So down to. Yes.
Yeah, I think the more asynchronous we can make these kind of things, the easier it'll be for sure. So yeah, Dave, I think we'll probably have to like. Well, I don't know how everyone else wants to vote. I don't really care. Like as long as I can kind of say yes, no, and potentially leave a comment, like that's like really all I care about in terms of functionality.
Yeah, there's
a So I don't know. I guess if you think of something and just send it, I would be pretty sweet to look at, and I'm pretty sure I would say yes immediately.
Cool.
Okay.
Edits is a good one though.
Edits is a good one.
That one broke my brain a bit.
Yeah. So this was the one where I was thinking, how exactly do we want to handle edits? Is it going to be like editing the Unix timestamp in place, or are we thinking about? Yes, thank you. Are we or are we thinking about creating a new timestamp and kind of Xing out the old one, or saying like that's a previous revision, like or is there a different scheme that I'm not thinking of here that would make sense in terms of changing a block?
I like the second one that you mentioned with the addition potentially of another metadata parameter, which is like parent or like based on, or I don't know, something that is a one-way link back to what it came from. Where you could imagine the UI kind of being like, if you hit edit on a post, it spins up a new Unix timestamp, copies the contents over. And then when you hit save, you've got your fresh timestamp. You've got the content that originated with, whether it was your own block or somebody else's block with that content, but you've edited it now, and now it's got its own ID. And then as long as there's something that's like parent colon, and then the ID, the Unix timestamp ID of where it came from, then you get like a nice breadcrumb trail of like edits with branching capability.
John, you're smiling.
Yes, this honestly, in terms of lineage, the closest thing I can think of is like Git, and Git is just really complicated. Like this model would be so easily parsable by like anything and everyone. That's just why I like it a lot. This is nice.
Copy content, new. Essentially, like that's kind of it's a really like ugly English synopsis, but at least for me that captures what needs to be, and I can clean it up later. But this is kind of just implying that now in our block here we'll have some other kind of field right at the top, like parent formatting, and then this will just be null default, otherwise Unix timestamp. Right.
Beautiful.
Okay. I think that should be pretty easy add, and if everyone's on board, we can go ahead with that as well, because that makes sense to me.
And then it works nicely with IPFS because then you don't have to go back and edit anything.
Yeah.
But then it brings in an interesting constraint, which is if it works out with every use case, but every post is now immutable in that sense.
Yep.
And that you never go back and change a post, like it's locked once it's up.
Yep.
It's a real blockchain. Interesting. Yeah. Is this done anywhere? Like like, or is this just making sense
This
for where we're at?
I've seen this pattern in IPFS kind of stuff of like how do you
Okay.
decentralize comments and or posts and
Hmm.
stuff. And then I think Git
Okay.
is a much more complicated version of this format of parent being a thing that you can have on any kind of node as a way of tracing back where it came from.
Okay. Interesting. Cool. I mean, it makes sense. It's got the lingo of lineage built into it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think especially if we are planning on going IPFS route and we do want to track lineage, this is a pretty good way to go about it without essentially relying on Git to track that history for us. We're
Mhm.
essentially building it in where we can track that history, and it's portable to something like IPFS as well.
Seems pretty to me.
Great. Okay, so I think that is most of everything that we have to do with like definitions to get our like base layer of everything working. So that's pretty nice. I think with that, I wrote maybe a few other things. So that's review schema. So now this is getting into like more specific stuff like what do we want to actually be using on the front end to actually input blocks, input posts into Buzzard.life. And then kind of once we have that idea, we can kind of decide the separation of concerns between what the front end should handle and what the back end should handle in terms of that. Because at least the three basic functionalities that I see is like being able to create a block, being able to edit a block, and being able to or view the block as implied as by being part of editing the block. So you have some way of like essentially querying for blocks as well. And then the ones that I was a little less sure about is, are we going to allow creation of posts directly from the UI, or is this something that you manually have to like kind of string together yourself? I personally feel like almost creating posts is a more natural thing to do than creating blocks most of the time. So it almost seems like that's where we should be kind of focusing.
Yeah. So I understand, and help me here.
Uh-huh.
Like we are jumping into like a sort of opinionated view of, I mean, a type of opinionated view. Our first primitive sort of type using the Legos is a post. And so we are talking about making a post maker.
A post maker.
Yeah. And so like, we can have some opinion on like what a decent post maker is for the style that we are trying to play with. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of variables in this and like how fancy it needs to be.
Like a composer editor tool, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's what this is. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of said like, okay, we can like go through user flows, but I also mocked up like some really simple like front end, which is basically like you have a markdown editor on one side, and then it just shows the blocks that are coming out of that markdown editor on the other side. And then like from there, I imagine like maybe you have some field for context as well. And if the context is for the entire post, every block just inherits that context or something like that. I don't know. This might be a good point for other people to jump into the Figma doc and kind of mock up like other approaches that they might want to use. For me, I don't have any particular preference. At some point, I'll probably write my own. But to start with, like anything, I think is fine.
Here, if you go over to the right, is what we did for Ponder.
Okay.
And the way it worked was basically, it was pretty opinionated, obviously. There was a chat interface at the bottom, and you could like type into that thing and then hit send, and that creates a block that's movable, like vertically. Yeah, and then you could hide or show them or whatever. There was a bunch of little things that we did. But yeah, that interface gave you the ability to sort of jam out blocks really quickly. This could very easily work, obviously, in just an open canvas where you're just bringing it in as, you know, and then you hit enter. It's more like the interface there is more like Notion. So yeah, I mean, this one is this decision gives you different types of content. Like the posts will be oriented differently. So like this, if we're just trying to prove like the simplest version of getting this thing in, like we can talk about that. Like, are we just trying to build, you know, the thing that is most in alignment with getting it out the door quickly, you know, like, and is that like a big text area? And this is where technically I don't know what the best move is there, because yeah.
I mean, there's a lot that I like about this interface. Like it kind of, if the dragging interface works like I think it does, then it, at least for me, kind of in some sense breaks the stream versus file question into well, actually it just doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and it didn't have titles either. We just like the topmost thing was the title, which for viewport purposes was useful, but you know, it was probably a little too clever with that. But it's also heading in a direction where it can become a canvas. Like that's how I saw the development of it, right?
Yeah. Okay.
You are like this little window, and I had I don't have the image icon in there, but I added multimedia next to the, like, you know, little send, damn it, where you can just, that's the upload button effectively for your medias. And then it would just inject it in as a block. So like I tested this, it works, it's fluid. It's, you know, the version that we built was like limited by my ability to write JavaScript and, you know, the engineer we were working with. So it was pretty clunky, but we hammered on it for at least 6 months. So, and we were posting things through it. But again, I'm not attached to this thing at all. It's just it's one variant.
It's very cool that it plugs right into the schema that we just established.
Yep. Yeah. I like that. I like that too. And since you guys wrote the code for Ponder, you can literally just rip the React component possibly directly in, which would be pretty nice.
That would save a lot of caffeine consumption.
Yeah, and I think it might be worth talking about how to build it from scratch, because we cobbled the thing together from like, I wasn't comfortable. It ended up where we couldn't get anywhere with it. So, but yeah.
I feel like just having the reference code alone would like be perfect.
Cool.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
I mean, I don't have to do any more thinking really, so that's great. It's a fun little interface. So yeah.
Yeah. At least for me personally, this is like the interface that I've mostly like designed for myself. So I'm like more than happy to use this, except this already has more functionality. So
cool.
If everyone, I mean, Shahruz, Kristen, what are you thinking?
I mean, I got to use Ponder and I liked the interface. Like it's super, there's something about I guess just the UI, you know what to do with it too. Like it's a text thing, like you are texting like yourself. So the ease of on the user side for me, like it was easy to dump into. It's inviting, so I'm totally for it.
Yeah, it's like a blank page and a blank conversation at the same time. I love it.
Yeah. You can also, it's got like there are a bunch of patterns on top of this that like work for like prompts. And then like, I mean, I've already worked out a lot of this kind of stuff. So like, and you can respond to the thing. You can add bots in here pretty easily, you know, like, yeah,
Group writing.
Yeah, group writing is the other part.
Like multiplayer kind of plugs right in. Yeah.
The writer's room scenario for this, I think, is the closest to improv that I've seen for an interface. So I would love to see writers dink with this at some point, like in a group. So,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I didn't. This feels nice.
It looks familiar too, because basically I've like been using Telegram as sort of this, but Telegram has some like opinions that it's a messaging thing first and foremost, not a user input or an information input tool. And so this kind of like pulls out the messenger portion of it and just sort of leaves that like streamy, like document creation elements. So I mean, perfect.
The one thing is getting this thing working on mobile is a doozy.
Yeah.
Anyways.
What was the issue? Was it mostly like design and formatting or functionality wise?
This is my ceiling on the like JavaScript stuff. Like, so like each of the, like Instagram has a decent one, Twitter has a decent one where like they've got a chat DME style interface. And you can just watch them in Safari, like hop around and do weird shit. So, and then iOS 15, they've just added the bottom bar stuff. So it's fucking everybody's like fixed. It's just so I don't know if there's a different stratum to build this in. And I'm sure people have abstracted this and fixed. This is what they just build apps at some point, I guess. So anyways, there is a sticky wicket there, but we didn't go too far afield into people who have like a lot of experience in this. We tried to roll it ourselves, and we were bashing up against having built this kind of thing. So there are people out there who can solve this, who would like to, I think. So,
and it feels like at least there may be some major separation between the mobile editor version of this and the mobile display version of this.
Yeah.
Because to render this for mobile is like piece of cake. You just basically drop this into HTML. Consumption, I feel like, has some like sticky places, like the dragging specifically, and the text input resizing. They're just like never operating correctly until you finally get them just right. So basically, like having a viewer at first maybe, and then when that sort of feels more solid, then just like roll it in as right functionality as well.
Yeah, and there's the place I landed with that was like, make it so that you can get thoughts into the thing, like prioritize that, and then, you know, I got them draggable. It's fine. It kind of works, you know, like it didn't throw the window around and stuff like that. That's fine.
That's important.
Some basic edit, like you can get it, but don't have it be your primary surface. Like you've got a desktop, you know, or I don't know, but having people use the thing and run into the problems and start yelling about it, you'll figure out where the tension is. And somebody could build something, go nuts.
True. And I feel like if you're saying you were using this on mobile.
Yeah, I made most of my posts on mobile. I
mean, I don't think you would like put up with a lot of, I guess, how should I put this, early rough edges. I feel like I will be like, oh my god, this is the best software I've ever like worked with. Yeah, so I think that'll.
It was workable. It was annoying, but workable. So like people for whom they're not very technical and they could use it. So
perfect.
Anyhow, cool. All right, that was surprising.
So real quick, I think CJ, what you were pointing out in the artboard that's like kind of northwest of this one. In the one above.
Yeah,
the one above.
But yeah, so we're basically between your wireframe and then Dave's mock-up from Ponder or screenshot. We're kind of abstracting block creation away a layer, and it's mostly artifacts are being spit out by a post creator, which is the primary UI. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
So I there's kind of a question that I had about this, which was, is it kind of up to the front end to essentially like create the post? Like it has enough logic to figure out how to compose a block that is a post as well as a block that is just a block. And then it just sends the backend all the blocks. It just says, here are all the blocks that I want to create. And then the backend goes and creates all those blocks.
Could go either way. It's kind of a question of, do you want the front end sending like a dozen API requests, you know, presuming there's 11 blocks and then one for the post itself, or do you want to send one API request to a backend as a post, and then it knows how to split those into blocks itself? Could see it going either way.
One thing that jumps to mind here is just the idea of running both the generation and composition on the same device and removing the need for like network, at least like responsive server access. So if the blocks are sort of able to be completely generated on the phone, just in plain JavaScript, then anybody can sort of go in there and pull that out locally to however they need it, instead of like rely on semi black box functionality. It's like a layer that's easily locally, you know, tinkerable with.
Yeah.
I was kind of leaning the same direction. Also thinking about potentially future, if this was running on a blockchain, to kind of minimize the like on-chain like interactions potentially, or doing less work on-chain where it's like purely just like adding blocks. But I don't have enough knowledge of Ethereum and Solidity to really say in that domain itself.
It would be around the same for either, but I also I want to think about it a little bit more, but I imagine that we could get away with just doing posts on chain. As long as all the blocks are on IPFS and referenceable by anything, you don't necessarily need to store each individual block on the chain.
I see. So like posts is more, I see. So blocks,
just a thought. I haven't fully.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like that.
I see what you're saying. I think that makes sense to me as well.
So you've just got the one IPFS hash to store on the chain. So it's a lot cheaper, regardless of which system you're using.
Right. And then essentially, if I'm trying to think about this, so if a post got updated, now you're like updating on the Ethereum blockchain as well.
Yep.
Okay.
But you'd only have to update the outermost layer, basically.
And then the inner ones are encapsulated because it's pointing to that
Yep.
file. Okay. That makes sense to me. So maybe for the time being, this question is actually like not super important, especially if we do like think about moving to Ethereum or something like that in the future. Is everyone fine just doing it on front end and saying we're just going to send blocks to the back end?
I mean, so help me understand so it's a local versus hosted sort of, like you get some offline usage or something here, like in one method, and then the reduction in API calls. Like I'm trying to feel into like what how to feel about that. or not. I don't really care. I'm just curious how you're feeling into it.
I think the way that we're leaning based on the conversation is reducing the surface area for an API that we centralize.
Okay.
Meaning if we deal with just like you can upload blocks, and that's the service that the API provides, that encapsulates all the functionality that we need, because you can send each individual block up first. Then once you've got IDs for each one, you can assemble the post and then just run that as another block.
Okay.
Versus doing a second API method that we would also have to maintain, which is sort of a convenience method of, hey, just send us the post itself, and then we'll disassemble it into blocks and upload those too.
Got it. And so then the front end isn't responsible for figuring all that stuff out. And okay, got it.
But yeah, I don't think any possible path here is like exclusionary to changing it later on either.
Right.
For sure.
I mean, this just also in terms of complexity, front end code is usually like base layer stuff, JavaScript, and nowadays like one of the easiest ways to run a server is also JavaScript. So
Yeah.
if there needs to be functionality moving between the two, it will be relatively easy.
Yeah, I'm more trying to feel into where the tension, if any, exists, and like if there is no natural tension anymore, like within a language dispute or cost or something like that, like how you kind of think about these things. And it seems like just sort of, I don't know, pick one that feels right and then go with it. So because there's something that knows that that's the right way to go. So yeah, it's interesting. Cool.
Yeah, I think Shahruz, at least like how you explained it, is like pretty much my rationale as well, as like keep the API surface area really small.
Cool.
Because it's just like dead simple that way. It doesn't have to do a lot. It's kind of dumb, and that makes it like should be easy to maintain. And then it kind of just makes sure that the people on the front end hopefully are interacting with it in the way that actually works for their application. It's kind of like on them to make sure their application runs.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, if the thing does what it's supposed to, and it does it simply, and then it limits the problem area. So yeah, makes sense.
Okay. So I think that answers, at least for me, like a bunch of questions. And then like within that, I imagine now essentially, okay, let's take this one step at a time. Okay. UI features, at least like the UI directly will be able to have like this create block. Well, we're really dealing in posts. So let's say it'll be able to create these posts. That'll be done via the chat interface. It'll be able to edit posts, which will also be done via that interface. And it'll also be able to somehow view posts to be able to edit them in the first place.
Yeah, so there's going to be a top level here to navigate into, like, how do you get to posts and where the, like, how does that, how are you thinking about that? Like,
yeah, this
like
is where,
yeah,
this is where I was going to say, I don't have tons of knowledge on like front end stuff or best like UX patterns. So if there's any suggestions, it would be really helpful, because I have no idea. I don't know if John, Shahruz, or Dave, Kristen, like there's a preferred way for any of y'all.
I mean, we're just getting into opinions again. I mean, I've got the whole of Ponder design. So that was one route. It was based on these things in streams. I don't think necessarily that's the right thing for us, but so it depends on what we want to do at first. Like we could have just a big stream of posts, right? That like spit out like it's basically what our slash blog is right now, right? And those are just ordered reverse chronologically, and there is like what I call an iceberg, which is basically just a summary of the post somehow visually, right? Or it's the whole thing like displayed out. You can display them all in line. This is what Tumblr did. This is, sort of Twitter. Anyways, this is a feed model, right?
Right.
And somewhere on that page, you have a post button, and you hit the post button, and it opens up this composer interface. You can build a new one. You hit post again, or send, or save, or whatever, and then it goes into the stream. And if you go into the stream down on one of the posts, you can hit edit and go into the post editor interface, right? Which is just the same as the post creator composer interface populated. That is the simplest version of this thing that I can think of, but maybe there's a simpler one. So if that painted anything.
Yeah, I'd love to see basically like check this out, especially if you have any
Yeah,
past mocks. But I'm very
sure.
much I suspect that like it, there's going to be a lot of elements that feel just like very sensible.
All right, let me.
I think maybe to me it makes a lot of sense as well. I wonder if just maybe some kind of like search or filtering functionality on top of it would also be like pretty helpful. Just to be like a drop down that says I only want posts from me, or I only want posts from John or Kristen or something, or type of something,
Sure.
or like a date range or whatever.
I got all
Okay.
that stuff.
Great. Perfect.
Nice.
We're ripping off Ponder.
I mean, it's fine. I'm done. I mean, this is somebody can see it finally.
How much are we
I'm excited to
expecting
use this interface.
11D to carry the weight here? Like, is it capable of scaling to where we want to go?
I think it would, I don't know.
I think probably for the initial viewer, it's enough, but
Yeah.
my guess is for the editor, it would be maybe it's enough. I guess if it's all like JavaScript embedded on a page, I think 11T could still handle it. But it wouldn't it would just be, I guess, like compiled directly into that page.
Right.
So I think this was another question that I had too, is like, I was kind of imagining that we're just going to spin up a React app or something to have the editor on. And then at least for now, the more traditional like view mechanism is still buzzard.life, the website. So we're kind of just shoehorning the content into 11T for now. But if it makes more sense to kind of just do them together, I think that's also kind of on the table here.
So just to double check, the question is basically is there a single mobile app that just essentially becomes an online version with like less limited functionality, or more of like keeping everything within 11T and just having like one single, I guess, code base for both?
I guess, yeah, it's kind of like, if we're expecting the editor to be something that might be kind of hard to cram into 11D, or we're kind of like shoehorning it in, then
Yeah.
should we spin up like a React or something else for that? And if so, should that also then cover the viewing over time, or should that be kind of like a step-by-step thing where we expect 11D to handle output at first and then figure out like a more React, interactive kind of output layer later? What is nice about that is it kind of forces the multi-client kind of like conformance early on of like, it's got to be backwards compatible with Buzzard.life, whatever you're posting on the new React thing. But yeah, I haven't worked enough with 11D to know where like the constraints come in and what its limitations really are.
I mean, the cobbled together like composer that we built was pretty complex. So, yeah. But we also built the whole of a backend or a whole, React app to manage the whole of all of these posts and everything. So, yeah. And then we were spitting out to just a Next.js like static site thingy for the actual viewing of the thing on the internet. But yeah, so the composer, if this helps at all, was groaning already. Yeah.
Yeah, that is helpful. Kind of like to map out the performance boundaries, sort of.
Yeah.
Of the switchover.
There's another point here that like I had built stuff like this before, but with somebody who had built a lot of this stuff. So Gustavo, when we were building that, he had never built anything like this, so he was doing it first time around, and yeah, had been sort of out of the front end building stuff for a long time. So grain of salt there. Like, we ran into a lot of headaches on that front because there wasn't like a sort of domain understanding. So yeah. Anyhow, so thinking this thing out first principles probably is worth doing.
Is React the kind of go-to alternative? Are we all comfortable with React?
I've used React.
I dislike that Facebook makes it, but
You can use Preact.
can you?
It's smaller and not made by Facebook, but it's compatible with React.
Nice. Didn't know about that.
Yeah, what is the it's just whatever's easiest to roll this stuff with. Is there a implication to this decision down the road? You can just rebuild everything. I mean, but if we get,
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Do you have any preference, Shahruz? Because I think I've seen, at least in your repos, it seems like you've used React or you've used React Native.
Yeah. React
Okay.
and Next.js for the web, I love. Yeah. But
Cool.
I'm also down to
what is
learn.
What is Next.js?
Next.js
Actually,
is
I'm super
kind
familiar.
of like a wraparound for React. So it gives you things like server-side rendering for your pages. It sets up all your routes automatically, so you can kind of just dump like files into a pages directory and they'll automatically be spun up. It just makes React for the web like super convenient. But it's complementary to React.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm pretty fine with React. Other than the Facebook thing, I've used it multiple times, and the first time I used it, it like kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Okay.
In the same way that Swift UI blew my mind, but I like Swift UI better. But it's like similar kind of like composing view concepts.
No, maybe I'll get to learn it from you guys.
I'm hoping to learn it as well, because like usually the projects I do with React, I'm just like, I arrived too late, but then like seeing it from the ground up usually is just like so much more sensible.
Okay.
So this is a good place for it.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I'm guessing like TypeScript with React, because TypeScript.
Yeah.
And then maybe plus Next.js. I'd be curious to play with it as well.
Yep.
Some
great
okay.
They have like an interactive tutorial on their site that's a really good kind of like selling point too as to why it's useful.
Okay, sweet. Definitely, we'll check that out. I love checking these things out. Cool. So we kind of have kind of coming back to where we were before. There's like the whole editor and viewer thing. If we want to do both of these, 11T. Well, I guess the editor, we're certainly doing a React app. For the viewer, is there any preference to go to React for now, or kind of just leave it backwards compatible and say like we'll just shoehorn it into 11T and make it work? Because I don't think it's going to be a huge. My guess is it's not going to be a huge deal. It'll be like a little bit hacky, but it won't be like a big problem.
So you're talking about like the
mostly Buzzard.life, the site itself.
Yeah. So okay.
It's like the editor is kind of entirely separated out from the site.
So what I'm trying to understand is like, I guess we're getting into sort of identity or authentication or something here, like how we're handling that. Like, how can the user edit the posts that they can edit, or I mean, everybody can edit everything, which is how we there's that.
Do things now.
Yeah, which is fine. And I don't mind continuing with that. Like, it's a high trust environment. Okay, that's fine.
I wonder if like for now authentication, I personally find authentication to be really annoying.
Yeah, it's terrible.
So I usually just hack something up to only authenticate me. but like that's kind of what I'm hoping for with like Ethereum, where when we move more towards more decentralized technologies, that the authentication can hopefully be more cleanly handled, and some of these questions can be answered more directly with like having an Ethereum account or whatever.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
At least for now, we can kind of just like say, no worries about authentication. Everyone just edits anything. Just put your author as the correct thing and say that's fine.
Okay, so we'll have a field for author then for now.
Or it can set a cookie in your browser or something, or has like
Just
a drop.
We can, yeah.
I could build either of those very, very quickly. If we do go with Next.js, there's a next auth library for GitHub authentication that's like very quick. And then for the Ethereum stuff, I have a hook that's open source on GitHub that is just a one line in React that gives you like connect and disconnect functionality.
Nice.
So if we want to not punt on that, I could knock one of those out pretty quick.
Cool.
I mean, I would love to be able to log in with Ethereum personally. I think that would be pretty sweet.
Works for me. I mean, I like it. It feels like the future.
It certainly does.
Like, I don't know. That would be amazing.
I mean, compared to the fucking like 3 months we spent trying to get authentication working on Ponder or whatever the hell it was, the one line of code seems good. Nice. Okay.
Okay.
So here is where I'm wondering about flow. So we've got something that is, yeah. I got to get better about like sticking the, I don't know about this stuff until we run into it, I guess. Yeah, so we basically need something to do that authentication. That happens at like, yeah, how does that flow work? I guess, what are we landing on at all? So are we just building out the /blog here? Like, is that the general plan? Like, what is?
Are we talking about writing flows or reading flows first?
I guess they're combined in my head. So let's start with reading first. Like, you go to buzzard.life and you like minimally go to /blog, right? This is how I've been thinking about this, but obviously this posting thing can post anywhere to anything. It's portable in that way, right? It's a button that pops open. So yeah, this is how I had it in Ponder. It's just a contextual button that lives everywhere on the site. And based on where you're posting, it would know like you posted here, right? So you pop open that app, compose it, and it drops it into a list or something. So, but we can figure out what the constraints on that are. Yeah, I need a little help here, I guess. Blog.
Which part?
Yeah, I'm scoping myself. So back to just /blog, right? Like, we put a button on that page, and then like if you are logged in via MetaMask, or how does that, like, to give you the button, right, effectively? Or I don't know, like, how does that
so
work?
we can put a button that says like log in or connect wallet anywhere.
Okay.
Make it look however we want, make it transfer across all the pages.
Yeah.
Clicking on that will open up a prompt that says like MetaMask or Wallet Connect. So MetaMask is like if you've got it installed in your browser, that's one click. Wallet Connect is basically every other wallet app. So if you use Rainbow or something along those lines, you'll get like the QR code. If you're on desktop, if you're on mobile, you'll just get like a big grid of icons of like,
got it.
Here's all the different wallet apps. Once you authenticate with that, which involves opening up the wallet and clicking like confirm or whatever on the account that you want to use, then the site knows what account you have and it's ready to use it however. So it's just connect wallet, and then the site knows your account address, and it can get your ENS name and all that kind of stuff too from it.
Got it. Okay, so then we know who you are, and we can have a post button, a big plus I've got it in the top right of that interface that I posted. It basically, and it pops open that chat log screen. So I think the simplest implementation of this is just to do this all on the.
And like an edit if. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
No,
I was just saying if it was like a page that already exists, it would be like an edit instead.
Yeah. So like that would be attached to the post somehow. Like, you know, currently we just have a list of posts and you can put the edit button there and associate it, or you can have it within the post when you're viewing the post in, you know, the same way that we're doing now on the 11D site. Yeah. And then that would just pop open the app. Yep, that's fine. I mean, all that's simple. Okay.
That seems fine. So we.
Yeah,
I think
I managed to fit all of that on one page, so that keeps it easy to like hold in memory. I mean, that's a nice.
Yeah, that gives
us nice
our
architecture. Basic
post flow, right? And then the authentication is like so much more elegant than the way we were doing this before. It's lovely. I fucking love it. And everything is sort of piecemealing itself. You've got this static site, or generally static. Yeah, I'm curious about all that. Like, how does that work? So
I'm kind of guessing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna, actually, you go ahead first.
I mean, I'm guessing.
So I know. I want to hear your guess.
Okay, so 11D. I don't know how it like. Yeah, how do you do this? It's got to redeploy. So right, like if you are viewing, say, this is why we made it an app, right? Like if you're going through and you're looking through the 11D site and it's deployed, you know, it's static, but it's got an edit button on it or whatever. You could pop open an editor that's running somewhere else, and then it could edit the thing and then push that to GitHub. Or, I mean, however the fuck we're doing that now, right? So like that's the limitation to 11D, is that like you're saving a thing and that save is a deploy to Netlify. That's how I'm thinking about it right now, but yeah.
So Next.js would get us dynamic support out of the box. Yeah.
Cool. Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
so this
sounds like kind of just removing the dependency on 11T and saying like let's give ourselves room to breathe and just do whatever we want.
Okay.
I'd much rather write JavaScript than 11T code, so definitely.
Great. Me too.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering how you guys stuck around in this thing this long. It was surprising to me.
I was like smashing my brain on interfaces to get around.
There was a familiar love about it. I was like, all right, I could probably wrangle this, but I was just like, you know, like this is. I was like, I can't wait to just be able to write JavaScript everywhere. Just like smash data together. Yeah, very down.
I'll give you all kinds of interfaces to write JavaScript about if you want.
Perfect. That sounds like a great combo.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, it'll be nice to see you guys cobble together something with the Next.js and React. It'll be fun to watch that. Yeah. Because last time I was just doing it in the dark, like, and just like, copy this over here and stick this over there. That seems to work. Nothing is exploding. I guess I understand what components are. Yeah.
I feel like that's pretty much the experience of everybody writing React, but people just get a little better at like managing the chaos. But pretty much that's where I am. So I get it.
Okay. Well, at least I'm not alone. Okay, cool. Yeah, where else? What else we got?
Okay. At least is that like flow. It seems like view and edit flow now are like seamlessly combined with each other and pretty simple.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
probably we can write a restriction like in the code itself that, you know, only certain people can edit the page or something. I don't know. I guess someone could hack the JavaScript and mess it up, but it's probably fine for now. Or we can restrict it on the back end. Either way.
If we have the parent thing in the schema, then anybody editing a post that's not theirs just makes it a post that is theirs, but now it has a lineage of where it came from. So you kind of don't need the permission thing.
Okay. Yeah. It's like an instant fork, basically.
Yeah. but it can be attributed properly because now
Very-
it's been
very
posted
neat.
by this person, but you can also see, well, the previous one in the chain was posted by a different person. So it's clearly not like an original that they can plagiarize easily.
Mm.
Totally. I like that. I really like that. John, nice.
Cool.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah, I don't know what the implications of that are yet. They feel substantive. So we'll see. Cool. Yeah.
It
I'm trying
might
not
be
to jump
interesting
ahead.
to like continue to edit things and like if there's like fractures and stuff
Yep,
and like merging and all this, but we'll see as it goes.
Yep.
Okay. So
Cool. So yeah. All right. So yeah, I'm still curious how like this is going to tie into the like larger Buzzard site, or are we just creating something new from scratch now? Like just start with this like post stream and then like are we trying to replicate what we already have or just let that grow out? Like how are we thinking about this?
that's also a good question. I was kind of wondering the same thing, whether we kind of have like almost these things going on in parallel to start and then kind of like deprecate the old one
Sure.
at some point. And like have this like be beta.buzzard.life or something, or if we have a name for this overall new project, we can call it something.
Sure.
So yeah, I don't know. Is there any preference for you guys?
I feel like one interesting thing maybe to port the data over from buzzard.life into this just sort of as an initial dry run to fill it with data and see where all the rough edges are on data display and rendering, and like you don't have to produce any extra content and you have a bunch of like beautiful testing data to work with. And it, also functionally transfers the archive into it.
Cool. Can we do get the author pages working again? And like all that stuff, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think so. So at least how I'm thinking about that personally is like from the back end is like we kind of have this like create block, edit blocks, and view blocks. Are the three main APIs that I'm like really thinking about. And
okay.
the view block would be able to be like, okay, view blocks only by this creator and that are only of type post. And then from there, now you can render the website.
Okay, so start thinking in queries for views is what I need to do.
And we're querying GitHub for the data source right now.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah. I don't know if GitHub directly has an API. If it does, that would also be pretty sweet. If not, then we can write just like a little tiny wrapper around the GitHub repo itself.
Right.
But they do have an API.
They do have an API. Okay. So that's going to be. Yeah, so I think it'll probably mostly depend on those queries on blocks, and hopefully, if we built our block schema well, hopefully it should support all of the queries that we want. And if not, then I think that's like a signal that we might need to rework some stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, this is where I can, so now I know how the blocks work. I can start laying out interfaces or like potential flows and stuff, and then show them to you guys and you can tell me whether or not they break or we can just build them, ideally if it's that easy. So cool, that's fun. So yeah, the games stuff we have in there now, how do we think about that in relation to all this?
That's a good question.
Do we have to think about that now?
Just I mean, thinking about it at all, like, you know, we could,
Yeah,
I mean, we are going to
just
continue
in
to play these
broad
games,
strokes. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like, it would be nice to continue to mark them up or have them be somewhere or something, you know,
Is this
in
like
relation.
a tags or collections question or something?
I think at least like this to me is almost starting to point to another structure on top of post, which is game,
Okay, yeah,
which is now like composing posts potentially.
Yes, a game builder.
And then we have to define the game schema and potentially like that, yeah, like
got
a
it.
game
Okay.
builder kind of thing. So I don't know if that's a question we want to punt for
I
Monday
think so. Yeah, that's a bunch.
or our next call, because I think that will be an interesting discussion itself.
Yeah, I guess games are in some sense that second or the second Lego piece that CJ mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
but it's a very, very like a big relevant one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's also going to start to quickly tie in like potentially relationships and like
Mhm.
like defining relationships potentially, and have maybe that built into the schema or some kind of like syntax for all that. But we'll kind of have to see. But I think that's a really good question, because I mean, like John said, we want really all of this to be like forwards compatible at least. So
Yeah.
testing if we can get all of the data from existing Buzzard.life into next Buzzard.life, then that would be a pretty good tell if we're doing like kind
Yeah.
of working in the right direction.
There's a translation here. So I think just sticking to the post, like, you know, like having author streams, like, you know, having your own area, and then because the main /blog thing is less important to me than having everybody have their areas they can post to. And then we can figure out different queries on that stuff.
Yep.
But like each of us being able to make post types or whatever, or so, you know, like being able to post into the thing, starting to structure these in such a way, yeah, that gives us the next to like, this is the collections and stuff. Okay. But for now, just getting our individual posts in there, starting to feel into the types that we would like to post in our individual streams. Being able to, like, this is where we can talk about filtering those things if you go to somebody's page, rather than having, I mean, we can also barf it out into a big mainstream, but I don't know that that's a pattern that makes a ton of sense. I don't know yet. I'm not sure. I mean, we can talk about it. We can mock it up pretty easily. So if
Yeah.
we've got the block spitting out or the post spitting out. Okay, yeah, I don't know that we need to, that's a lot more design front-endy stuff. We can sort of,
I've
I don't know.
got a question.
I don't know. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
I've got a question which might be related to how posts work versus games, and then also might be a schema problem. So in our posts, we're assuming that each of the IDs that's referenced in that list is a block that's not a post as of now, right? Because how do we handle it if it's a list of other posts that it's referencing? And is that what a game essentially is doing? Like, is it really just one abstraction that's like more like a collection or a list of anything? Or is post gonna need to filter somehow to not include other posts? Or is post gonna have to support some kind of embed format for a full other post? In which case, does that solve what a game page or a game post might need to be? Does that make sense, or am I just rambling about a weird edge case? Okay.
No.
I'm trying to follow. I feel where you're going. Like, can you give it to me again?
Or just like some scenarios where we would encounter this.
Sure.
But yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
So yeah, if anybody can write a post by putting in a series of IDs to other blocks, what is the expectation in terms of what you would see if I were to make a post that just references a whole bunch of other posts, where they're no longer necessarily kind of like embeddable in full, or they might be, but they'll all stack. We don't necessarily have a format for like, here's the title and description or a preview of a post. That's not inherent to anything in the schema yet.
Mm.
So then the options
Like
become
post
do
doesn't
you-
have
yeah,
any like additional metadata associated with it.
Yeah. So I guess the question just is like, does that get solved through rules in terms of like posts are just not allowed to reference other posts, or rules in terms of if a post does reference another post, this is how it should look roughly and what should be included? Or the third kind of like crazier thing is like, are we talking about one abstraction that's more just like a collection or a list that would handle both posts and games, which I think a game is a series of posts with some other metadata, right?
Yeah.
So like, can it be simplified into one abstraction, which is more along the lines of a collection or a list, but also doubles as a post? And then obviously the front end can be whatever abstraction or context makes sense to the user. This is just like the back end technical abstraction to keep things simple.
Got it. So there's a component effectively like that is a list component, and then you can feed it whatever you need to. Okay. Yeah, this is how we built Ponder, I think.
I think going the most abstract makes the most sense to me. At least like to me, it makes it makes sense to me why you should be able to embed, like a post is just another block. So it should be able to like continuously embed, like there is no like functional difference between them. And yeah, is it then just a list?
For a post with other posts inside, would you picture it being like a series of embeds or like links or excerpts or transclusions, or like the entire kind of dump of that content from that referenced post, and then the next one in full, and then the next one in full? So you get like a really long page that's just like, here's a single page view of all these posts.
So this is where like I can see there is at least there are a few views here. There are lots of views here. Like one of them is a truncated view of the post, right? So that like you can, I mean, yeah, it's like the Google Reader thing. You remember the toggle between like truncated, full, or yeah, like those are the two main toggles, and so you can adjust the density of your media within a feed. I think that this is like so from a viewer standpoint, having these controls available so that you can mediate your consumption style, I think is nice, right? I think that heading in that direction is good. So if that's possible, and that helps make the decision on how the data is formatted, that's something. Yeah, because if you had a list and it's like, give me the condensed, metadata view of all the posts in the list, right? Like there is something that's saying that. I don't. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love it as a front end toggle for users too. Does that then solve the game page problem? Like, could you functionally create our version of a game page by creating a post that just includes the right IDs to other posts? There's a level of like manual input there that.
I think so, but you might need to create like additional blocks as well to specify it like nicely.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying just you can compose a game. Yeah. So.
Just like trying to get to the least number of primitive units possible.
Yeah. So in this case, let me walk through a flow potentially and see if this is kind of what you're talking about. So in the case that there are, so the manual version of this is if you want to like pull in a reference to a post in a new post, right? Like, so which means that there is a block view in the editor of a post, right? A representation, and then you can move those around, and there's probably we're going to get pretty quickly to add a caption to this thing, or I don't know, right? Okay, and then to build a page around these things, you could write in whatever you needed to. Here's the title, and here's a subtitle, and here's some structural information. And then that barfs out into what you could call a game page. It's not automated. That's a manual version of building one of these things. Later, like if we get some formatting down on one of these things, the system could just spit these out as a representation of each step and each flow. I mean, yeah, so this is where like having a front end block type that is post, that makes sense. I don't know where it breaks, or I mean, it gives us some more primitives to work with, like seeing what we can do with it. And then the question is probably to Kristen to see if, or whoever is building the game pages, but that has been Kristen, if she could build it with this model, I guess. So that's, if you could follow all that.
You're basically saying that the only thing I have in my head is that there's a like iceberg view of the posts, which is like a simplified view that you could build with. That's a primitive type, so it's equivalent to a retweet, right? Yeah.
Kind of like that, yeah. Like Toby Shorin has
formatted
that
in a certain way. Oh yeah, that
iframey kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. So
that we could probably use.
So you could do that with any post, which is a block. You could do that with any block, is what you're saying.
That's another way of looking at it too. That's I mean, so we were talking about like, okay, so that's a level of specificity of moving blocks between posts and referencing blocks between posts. We haven't really talked about that. That's another one. This one, as I understand it,
fractal though.
Yeah, I mean, you get similar patterns, but for now, we are like what we're talking. I guess we're talking about the game page and how they're structured, and using this block model and editor model to reconstruct those game pages from posts or something. And we may be, yeah.
I don't know why it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Okay, then there you go.
Because the way that it's formatted now, sometimes this is all up for grabs, but yeah, I don't know why it wouldn't work. Everything's plug and play.
Sure, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm just mapping it out for my own. Yeah, and then you've been building them, so if you know the structure, it's great. Good, cool.
Well, like if each post is its own, you can point to it and go to it, and there's an embed. Yeah. I mean, embed or URL, like, or just linking to it. Yeah, it should be fine. Yeah. I don't know if you want some kind of, this is just views on what the iceberg could look like too.
Yeah,
so games might look like a thing. I don't know.
I think the question on the schema side is more, can all that data be collapsed into just like a list of other IDs, which it seems like yes, because it can be viewed however.
Yeah.
I think it's like very dependent on how like blocks are probably created, because it seems like post is almost like at this point it's more just a collection of blocks that is displayed on the website. But it like, other than like the type and saying that these collection of blocks are getting displayed on the website, it's not really doing that much. It's really just a collection. So in that way, like theoretically any of these blocks can be composed anyway. So a game can definitely be composed, whether it'll be kind of annoying to compose, that might be another challenge. It certainly can be composed, but it might be a little bit technical or challenging to compose it.
But it will
Maybe.
be consistent at the very least.
It will be
I
consistent.
think that's what's perhaps most beneficial to long-term like editing.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel the form of these things like a game blocky builder, damn it. Like, because each of these a block can be functional and like people can run it together and there's a time. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I think we'll probably really need like a dedicated session to kind of work through game. I think it can be built, and it's just going to take like a little bit of like combined brain power to really sit and focus and see what is the right model, or what will create the right model. And maybe it's like try to replicate the game page. Like maybe we play a small game and say try to replicate the game page given like the editor we have, and see what emerges.
Yeah, I'm like what I'm
that's
feeling
like one way
is there is like one level of abstraction that Shahruz can see that we may need to build the post flow to then it'll be obvious maybe, or is that it, like, because there's this listy component thing and then the way the posts are structures in relationship to each other that like I don't know that I don't understand, but maybe you guys do. Like, because it's a back end implication more than it is a front end one, I believe.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, got it. I'm just making sure I know where I'm at.
Yeah, basically just saying we have this post concept, which is a list of things. Can that also apply to a list of posts, as opposed to needing yet another type to do that?
Yeah, it's just it's a list block. Is that?
Yeah.
Got it.
A list or a collection or whatever you want to call it, but yeah,
sure.
Yeah, an array. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so we just get rid of it. So this replaces post as type, and then we just have list as type, and then that can somehow do things.
Yeah, I think this is going to get interesting when it goes to like querying. Is like, I think maybe like the only like useful thing about post is you're like, oh, I want to display a post on the website, and it's like a shorthand for like actually querying that data and getting it out. Underlying the fundamental like unit is a list though.
Okay.
So it seems like it's kind of like just a shorthand for a list. At least in my mind, that's how I'm like conceiving of a post. So this will be something like interesting with type, or if type really fits, or we need like different relationship or different metadata information going forward. I can see that maybe slightly different metadata would be kind of useful to compose these things more effectively.
Yeah. Yeah,
let's just run into this problem, and then
I think this is
and then for the slower amongst us, it'll be probably more evident, and then I think this conversation will pick up again in relationship to like building the game schema, and then probably that's my suggestion. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be
I'm
interesting.
definitely feeling, at least in my like brain, some tension between what is even a post and a game and a schema. Like they feel like fractal reflections of each other, and getting, I guess, having the chance to really like, take another one of these sessions and like try to like mold it into something that makes sense from both sides sounds really, really, really high art. Like very, very important.
Cool.
So,
all right.
I loved it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the next unit of work is just getting this post flow cobbled together with, okay.
Yeah. So I guess that was like the final thing. I think it's getting kind of late now. So I think let's like maybe like focus the games for the other discussion. I think maybe the only really last things I had, I think we're completely settling on the technologies. Like we're doing React and TypeScript for front end. CSS, I'm guessing like whatever Dave wants I mean, I don't know what anyone wants. I usually just write CSS by hand, so I don't know what people want.
Last time, actually, Shahruz, you may have some input on this. Like, we can do this pretty quick. We did styled components, and I just wrote them mostly like CSS and didn't use a lot of JavaScript in the stuff and didn't get too clever with things. And I prefer to do just custom stuff. And then somebody is going to be much better at building a design system than I am, but I can paint everything. So if there is a structure that you've worked with, Shahruz, or anybody's worked with, I'm completely open to learning that stuff.
It all ends up looking pretty similar. So Next.js has a built-in thing called styled JSX, which is basically styled components. Like you write it as CSS, but it's just embedded inside the component. So it's scoped nicely. It doesn't interfere with other stuff.
Okay.
But there's no special syntax to it. It's plain old CSS.
I like plain old CSS.
I think that's effectively what I do too.
I know a lot of people like Tailwind, but I have zero experience with Tailwind.
Yeah.
Been using it for about a year and a half in like a small team, and there's pros and cons to it, but basically like all comes down to how complicated is the thing that you're trying to display in CSS. And it feels like for most of our things here, like that level of modularity and like specificity just really wouldn't even be necessary. Like I just need a margin on like desktop, margin on mobile, some color shading, font stuff, and then like positioning. Like the fewer libraries involved in that process, the better. People wrote CSS like 10 years ago. Like let them use it. They started learning it like a while back. The MySpace days, people can finally like that's something. I'll bet most people just remember it. So, or not remember it, but like it's a model that they can pick up relatively easily. So, definitely down for pure.
Cool. I mean, I don't have to throw away 20 plus years of dinking around with it, so that'd be nice. Cool. Great. Yeah. So the styled JSX stuff, I'll take a look at that, and then, well, I guess as we get into it, and I'll ask questions as necessary. Cool.
Okay. I don't know if we're using a basically text editing library. I think most of this is this could maybe be a text area. It's pretty simple. It'll probably, I think the libraries maybe specifying here is almost too specific. And I think anything, I don't know that much about front end. I kind of usually just use some library if it exists. Otherwise I just write it myself. So unless there's any specific attachment, then
there's probably going to be stuff with the draggable stuff.
Yeah,
we're not writing that by ourselves.
No, we are not.
There'll be some library there, but I don't know what's best.
If draggable with text areas makes sense to me instead of one off-the-shelf library, because an off-the-shelf library would probably be here's one big markdown block.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, in other words, text areas only accept input, and they're not rendering anything.
I think so.
That's would be preferred, I think. So in other words, the preview can be generated separately, and it doesn't have to feed back into the editor itself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That can be side by side through a separate component too, but I think the editor component should be, text area seems simple.
I definitely like that a lot.
Yeah, this is just in the future, I mean, this all works for now for sure. I don't know where you go with rich text or any of this stuff. We don't have to worry about that now. This is just coming up. So anyhow, yep, cool.
Yeah, I mean, longer term, of course, I think there'd be a lot of room for dynamic displays, but to get a really, really simple publishing system,
totally.
there's a sense that I've almost grown to really enjoy those very binary splits, because it's basically I know I can just reproduce this file on any machine, and I'm just consistency is really good.
Works for me.
Okay, cool. I think that works for everyone. So in terms of deploying the React app, I don't know. I usually deploy things on web servers. If anyone else has certain ways of deploying, I think I'm up for it.
Other ways of deploying is in like specific services, or
Yeah,
you thinking, like,
services or
architecturally?
methodology. Like normally I just like throw something behind like an Nginx reverse proxy and call it a day.
Yeah, I mean I've done the web server route, and I guess like the more pages route, and usually I like having pages because it just means like something is there and it's not needing to be managed, and like I don't need SSH keys on my local machine to edit like the source. I can basically get to it through auth. But there's also like time considerations with that, because GitHub Pages takes a while to like rebuild. Although that shouldn't be much of a thing, but although if it's static, I think it's much faster. So at any rate, I like the idea of like being able to push files somewhere fast myself, rather than waiting for a build/deploy process to run, and to essentially be able to like compose a full copy of it locally and run it before like pushing it off to somewhere. But that's just a preference, like I would bias towards.
Okay. Shahruz, do you have any preference or anything you like particularly like using?
I always use Vercel for Next.js stuff because it's made by the same folks, but it's exactly the same as Netlify, essentially. Like same flows, same integrations with GitHub and stuff.
Yeah, I think the specific tool matters a lot less than just that, like, I guess, model
That
of
flow.
Yeah, like managed and soft interface between them.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. I'm fine with that because
I have a blog is because I have Netlify on it. I would have like been a lot more frustrated without it.
Yeah, I'm fine. I web admin way too many servers. It's like a pain in the ass at this point. So anything like that is fine. I'm just gonna like highlight these two and just say, okay, we'll kind of get there. The specific one probably doesn't matter so much, but kind of going that route makes more sense.
Good.
Okay. Front end, everyone is like pretty much happy. We're using like similar Ponder interface kind of thing. We have our view edit, kind of went through all the flow already as well. The technologies seem like they're pretty much down. Are there any other like kind of further questions on this one?
None for me.
Cool. let's wrap this up.
Actually, one quick one.
Yeah.
Yeah, really quick. Are we setting up the blocks directory in the existing Buzzard repo, or is that a new repo in the organization?
That's a good question. That do we want to do a new one? I would be kind of fine with a new one since we're kind of moving everything to a new framework entirely. And if we really want, we can backport blocks as well.
That's what I was thinking as well. Yeah, like since the data is going to be migrated anyway, there's just one layer above.
Okay.
And then I think that should make like querying like with the GitHub API a little bit more straightforward too, because you have one consistent kind of format for everything.
Yep.
Okay. And are you imagining like Shahruz for that is like it's just a repo called blocks, and then from there we just dump all the files in it, like just really simple, dead simple, or
It
one
might
level
still
deeper?
be good to have a directory called blocks, just so we can kind of namespace, and if we have our package.json that we need for something, or
Sure.
any other stuff in the root directory. But
okay.
Yeah, I think putting it into a directory would be good.
And just the name blocks is fine. We can do blocks/blocks. Good. Sweet. Okay. So backend, I guess, mostly are similar questions. What language are we going to use? Do you also want to do this in Node/TypeScript? I don't have really any preference here.
If we're going with Next, it's built in, so you can just make an
Okay.
API route like easily.
Okay,
TypeScript
great.
Node.
And it says that.
That
And then
is
it's
great.
yeah,
I'm gonna have to learn that, but that's amazing.
it's dead simple. But then that also solves the deploy problem, because then you can just deploy the whole repo into one spot and get both.
Okay, so it's also going to be kind of like mono repo as well.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. And then I guess the APIs, I think it's just essentially the three in this green color. Create blocks, and I'm imagining, I don't know how much we really need to specify here. I think basically the schema that we have for each block, and then it's a list of those. Like, that's what I'm kind of imagining, and that's really it. Maybe there's like some additional auth stuff that might need to be in there, but I think even just a list of pure blocks is enough over JSON. That seems simple enough?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Edit blocks, I guess, will be.
I think that's the same as create blocks now, potentially.
Yeah, it
You're
will
just
be.
including the parent
It's
field.
the parent. Yeah, so that'll be up to the front end to handle.
Yep.
Okay. And then view blocks is essentially like the querying, which is just taking the schema fields or some modification to the schema fields. I had by creator, by date, or date range really, and by block type, and then maybe some level of like search functionality in there as well that it can return.
Yep.
Yeah. Seems good. Seems simple. Okay. So all that is figured
That's
out.
simple.
How is post going to be created? We kind of already got this done because now everything is on React. Blocks are stored. We have that answered. Our assets blocks. And I think that's the only thing is the assets get stored. There's going to be an upload. So maybe there's kind of one additional that is for upload data. And that'll create an asset. And then that'll return
An ID.
That'll return some ID.
Yeah. So it can be a separate component if needed.
Can be a separate component if needed. Yeah. And I guess ID and maybe like URL or something for convenience sake.
Yep.
Though URL should be easily able to be figured out via ID. Anything else missing here?
Can't think of anything.
Okay. Repo name. Dave, I think you're pretty good at names.
This one I don't know. This one is more in your territory. So this one is what is this all representing? Give me a shorthand.
This is the post creator and viewer. This is the Buzzard.life website.
What?
Honeycombs.
Yeah, we're building like the little fundamental blocks.
So this is our like first opinionated take on the media Lego thing, effectively, right? Like, yeah, we don't need to keep the Buzzard stuff necessarily because it's more of a tool. This one's tough. I hadn't thought that this existed. What's a So it's a style of like block posting or something. Yeah, what the fuck is this? It doesn't have a name yet. Doesn't know who it is. Shahruz, what does this thing
I've
feel
only
like?
ever got dumb names. Block spot, blocker.
What is it? Blocker,
It's like
huh?
block spot. These are terrible names.
Block
I'm just
spot.
thinking
No. This
block
is a.
terms
It's,
and replacing it with block.
that gets us somewhere. This is we're doing copywriting. It's fun. So I was writing down chat logging before because that's where like the concept of a chat log or chat blog, right? Or chat blocking. It's like a conversational block posting thingamajig. Don't know how hard we want to hit the block concept, if that's necessary at all. So I called this thing Ponder before. What is it? What do we want this thing to feel like or be like? We're in a what are we doing with Buzzard as an experiment?
Haven't we been talking about hive stuff and swarms? Do we want to go that route? That's why I'm saying honeycombs, because honeycombs are like the base like block in building a hive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like cool with honeycombs. I like the
Got a
nature
very soft
kind of.
name.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
We'll start there. I think we'll live with it for a little bit, see how that feels.
Yep. We can always rename it.
Yep.
It's not set in stone.
Nope.
Cool. Well, fortunately, that was a lot, guys. Thank you for bearing with, because we went through a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you for
CJ,
putting all
when you
the
said
Figma together.
yeah, like when I saw the Figma, I was like, holy shit. I mean, like, how do I even like, where's the high bandwidth interface I need to like answer this stuff, or just like, like understand it. Figma plus video is definitely the way to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, it's
Sweet.
good.
Sweet, because I started writing it down and I was like, I'm going crazy, and I'm for sure gonna have to share this, and writing it down is not gonna work.
Yeah.
Good call. That's great.
Okay, cool. So I think the only other thing was like, I don't know who wants to work on what, who wants to like, actually, Shahruz, if you wouldn't mind kind of starting the repo off, at least with all the Next.js stuff, so we can kind of just like start tinkering with it. That would be really amazing. I've not personally worked with it. And I'm still relatively new to these like JavaScript environments. Like Node.js like blew my mind like 3 months ago when I like first, or like 6 months ago when I first used it. So it took me a while to even wrap my head around what was going on. So if you could start that, it would be great.
Yeah, I'll get some scaffolding in and then write up the README so it's easy to hop into and set up locally.
Awesome. And then from there, I'm not sure how else we want to like distribute the like work, or if we want to do like partnering sessions for like actual code writing, or
that
what.
That could be very fun. I'd be very down for that.
Same.
Yeah. What's a good way to organize that? I'm not really sure.
So I haven't done a lot of pair programming, but and like given all of our schedules and things, but kind of what I could maybe see is just like one final document that condenses everything into more or less components or flows, and then we just sort of go through it and highlight the things that we want / plan / intend to try to poke at, and then if there's like commonalities, then we like both sort of schedule that chunk and maybe try to just like coordinate off of that for the first round and see, and then maybe sync up back together for another video chat.
Okay. Yeah, I think that sounds good to me. I think everyone should have edit on this doc. I don't know if we want to continue to just use this doc, so it's like just there as a reference, and we can kind of just compose a new frame with everything solidified. And then, yeah, like you said, John, maybe Dave, this is also a place where we can kind of use like some like interest slider per person or something to say like I want to work on that or whatever.
Okay.
Like some way of like visualizing interest in that work, kind of like John was mentioning. And then kind of go from there and see. And I think, you know, that little piece of doc can kind of hopefully be everyone working on it.
And I guess, yeah, just sort of branch out for more Figma things if you need to like visualize or display something, just kind of expand out into the document.
Sweet.
Yeah, I'm gonna sort of follow your guys' lead on where to on-ramp any of the front end stuff that I can do. Yeah, I don't know. So, yeah, I'm not sure best like if I should just dump comps in here or like how to go about doing that. Yeah, I don't know how you guys like this in the past because yeah. Okay, we can figure it out.
I've
what's
never
like the
done
most-
this in the past.
Yeah. What's the most like
Pretty
fun and
unexpected.
productive for you?
I mean, I'll snapshot the kinds of things that I think like some interfaces, and then because I've already done a fair amount of this work, dump them in a doc, and then like yeah, I don't know. We can see if anybody needs explanation, or I can walk through the comps, and then once we get the interfaces like established in code, then I can do a lot. And since you guys are all, yeah, I don't know if we can just wing it from there. I have no idea. It's been a while since I've like worked in a larger team, so we'll see how it goes. Cool.
Sounds great to me.
All right.
It's nice the bird
Cool.
theme works with winging it generally too.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Yes.
We're buzzards winging it. I mean, that's how I do everything. So yeah.
Perfect.
Good.
Perfect.
And my headphones died. Perfect timing.
Meetings constrained to one device
headphone.
of a typical AirPod. It's a nice frame.
I mean, we covered a lot of ground for 2 hours.
It was great.
So
Yeah.
Extremely productive.
Rad.
Dense. Yeah,
cool.
everybody.
Sweet.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I guess this one will be
Next
kind of
time.
asynchronous from here, and we'll sync again on Monday and see where we're at. I don't know if we want to assign more homework or to kind of just leave it as things go.
I think we should do another one of the forum things. And if anything pops up in the meantime, just sort of plop it in there maybe. And
Yep.
then coordinate from there.
Sounds good to me.
Sick.
Sweet.
See you guys on the internet.
Cool. All right.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good night.
You
Yep.
too.
See ya.